more time, you know. Babylon is trying to take away your time, you know. Take away your freedom, your ganja, you know. Don't let them do that. Yes. We all need time. We all need time. We all need time. Yeah, yeah, yeah. BRazaman, one more time. We all need time. Making music and just make you feel alright. We all need time. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think we need a baseline. I'm pretty sure we need a baseline. We all need more time. Family, unity, we all need time. Ganja means time. Rastafari means time. Tribulation come. Are you ready or not? I am ready or not? I say, time my turn. Are you ready or not? Are you ready or not? I say, my brother gonna run. Are you ready or not? Are you ready or not? I say, time has come. Say, ganja got to burn. Say, hey, time has come. Rhythm got to play. Fire gonna burn. Say, hey, time has come. BRazaman, I need teachers, no. Come. Music gonna come. you feeling? Are you guys feeling irate? Yes? Are you guys feeling good vibration? Reggae music coming at good vibration. Ganja come. Let the music run like a revelation. Hey, tribulation come, BRazaman. Tribulation come, fire burn. Tribulation come, Jaja burn. Tribulation come, let the fire run. Tribulation come, say, oh, there's a train coming. Let's get on. There's a train coming. Coming again, hey. There's a train coming. Let's get on. Fire burn, there's a train coming. Coming again. There's a train coming. Oh, there's a train coming. 420 men are coming. It's time, eh? 420, it's time, eh? Please play some ganja on the yard. Say, hey, BRazaman, I feel alive, eh? Say, I like to improvise, say, I like to, hey. Chant and sing. What the almighty king I say, we got the chant and sing. Yes, my little people, my lovely people, you know this is free. And this is free. Reggae music got to play and it's free. It's for the free people like, free people like. Say, BRazaman say, BRazaman come again and again say. Oh, Jaja Nova come again and again say. Oh, Jaja free the planter say. Today, hey, not tomorrow. Today, right now, right here, right here, right now, right here, I say. Right here, right now, right here, I say. See the smoker, I don't just planta, I'm not secret, I say. BRazaman, I sing legend, hey. Free the planta, legalize We all need time, hey. BRazaman up on the mic, hey. Yo. Yes, I hope you guys enjoy, you know. This is free music for the free people, you know. It's like we have to do with the plants, you know. Legalize, liberate, you know the culture, you know the roots, you know, the real roots, you know. Ganja is the roots, you know, is the revelation, you know. And I'm not talking about, you know, Jah and God and this and that, because I don't really mind what you believe, you know. But Ganja is the revelation for each I and I. You know what I mean? I mean you. And I mean I, you know, and I and Jah, and I and whatever you want to call it, man. Is the revelation for each and everyone, you know, for the truth, you know, inside. Yes. BRazaman, please.
Okay, so I'd like to welcome you all back and thank you for hanging around. And thank BRazaman for, man, Andre, that music is just... heart and proper soul. I mean, for those of you that were at the 420 picnic this year, we were blessed to have those rhythms sort of like pumping across the park. I mean, you could just... Flagstaff Gardens on a 420 picnic is as close to heaven as you will ever get. You know, like for a park in the middle of an intense city like Melbourne. I mean, we're talking about high rises, we're talking about there's so many horrible things that happen, you know, in cities to go with. And in the middle of it, in this really, really old park, surrounding this really, really old tree, you find a little bunch of people just being happy. You know, it's like it's a moment that is created. And it doesn't matter who you are or where you come from, the moment you step into that park, you feel okay. I mean, we get families wandering through, we get people that just don't even know what's going on, and they'll get halfway across and they'll be like, what? Wow. They'll just keep walking. And one of the best things, I think, about the picnic, because keep in mind it is a park in the middle of the capital city and it gets trashed on a regular occasion, every weekend. I mean, parks, the rangers are there cleaning up, except for the weekend that the 420 picnic's on. Because each and every person there polices those grounds. They grab a bag, they run around. They're not picking up their own trash, they're picking up everybody's trash. We don't have to pick up what we leave, we pick up what was left. The rangers have actually said, mate, there isn't another day, the entire month, where the park is as clean as it is after a 420 picnic. And that's because of the people. There's no orders, there's no hardcore crew of people that do all of the work. I mean, there is a core of people that do an awful lot of work, but it's the people, it's the community that gather there on that day. They take responsibility for that space. We don't have violence. We don't have problems. We don't have shouting and screaming. We have a lot of laughter, a lot of smiles, and a lot of people going away after having met other wonderful people. It's part of what our community is, and that is why Melbourne is what it is today. And it's got to do with people like you, who actually make the effort to come to things like this. I mean, we've been fighting this battle, like I said, for over quarter of a century, since the last sort of like almost got there. In 92, I kid you not, in 92, we almost got there. But we didn't get there. I don't want to see that same thing being said in 25 years. So when you leave here today, don't go out there trying to convince everyone that cannabis is good. Just make it really, really plain and clear that prohibition is hurting people. Not just the people that use cannabis, not just the people that need to use cannabis, but society as a whole. The fracture that is there, separating families, societies, communities. This is where the big issue is in drugs. It's not the use of drugs, it's not the effects of drugs, it's the prohibition against drugs and the burden that places upon the people. Anyway.
Crime against humanity. Prohibition.
Prohibition sucks.
Can say no to prohibition?
No. You've got to love these ladies. Oh, have you been showing off your fresh tattoos, ladies? Worse than my mum. Well, not quite. Mum's got them everywhere. You don't want to know about mum. But it explains an awful lot about me, all right? And the fact that I've been riding motorcycles since I was old enough to walk. Now, I've got some questions here that were sent in, so I'm going to go through these as well. But before we go too deeply into these, hello. I think Greg, someone's just trying to give me your phone number. Told him the jacket is doing well tonight. And the red, it's the red shirt, isn't it? It didn't bring that in colour. So, as I said, I do have some special guests that have travelled down from Queensland for this evening. So, I'm actually going to invite Belinda to come first off the bat. I'm not even going to give any warning. Now, as I explained, these ladies are part of the MCUA, that's this mob over here, the Medical Cannabis Users Association. Now, they were crazy enough last week to make me their media spokesperson. But that's okay, I'm lovable. So, I think that the fact that they've made the trip down here shows that not only are they willing to do what it takes to help the patients, they're willing to do what it takes to take the movement forwards. Because we have a lot of people that sort of, we've got businesses and industries building up around us. Yeah, I talk too much, don't I? You can see he's going to sleep. Did I say it was all about me?
A couple of times.
It's definitely all about you, Jason.
Yes. I see my reputation precedes me. Only because I send messages forward. The thing is, we've got people here, like Belinda, who is very, very involved in assisting patients out there. But mate, they've just travelled halfway across this country to come here tonight because they know that we are one community. And that when we're reaching out to the world, we're reaching out as one community. We're not looking for stagnation. We're not looking to be fighting this battle forever. We're looking to win this war.
We're wanting affordable access for all.
Yay!
Full access in Canada. I mean, we're not asking to reinvent the wheel. It's not like it hasn't been done elsewhere successfully. Anyway, Belinda, please, welcome to the Targo Margo. Welcome to Intersection.
Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here today. I can tell you that the state of Victoria is just beautiful. We drove for miles, didn't we, girls? A really long way yesterday from Newcastle. Yeah, we've been to the Church of Ubuntu and prayed the old her. So it was great. Yeah, wasn't it, girls? So
Sorry, I had visions. I just remembered his name's BJ. No, I'm just like
that's right. BJ does work there, doesn't he? He does, yeah. And actually, he's one of the more interesting oil makers, I think, on the eastern coast. A little bit misunderstood at times, perhaps. But I'm ever so grateful to BJ because he stood up and provided oil for my niece. Little Isabella at the time was only 9. She's now 12. She has Dravet syndrome. And I think you'll find that there's there is a compassionate access scheme going through the hospital, the Children's Hospital up in Brisbane. But it's very limited to the amount of children that can actually access it. And there's only one doctor prescribing it. So, it's very difficult for children to actually access anything legally in this country. Now, that's why I started out. My sister came to me. My sister is Deborah Camacho. She came to me and said, I don't want my daughter to die. Well, we don't want her to die either. All the medications that she was on were killing her slowly. And Deborah just said, I don't want her to die, so what am I going to do? So we looked for an underground healthcare system to help us out. Now, I've been a nurse for 25 years, and I don't know if anybody else here has been a healthcare professional or worked in healthcare over the past 20 to 30 years, but it's been challenging because every time somebody presents and they say, hey, I got a bit stoned last night, I just had whipped a few too many bongs,
Stoner's fault, right?
Yeah. I've been down to Brunswick Street, and perhaps met up with some friends there and handed a little ecstasy tablet. But during those last 25 years, I found that it's amazing, isn't it? I found that I was absolutely confronted when anybody turned up and. Young men generally, some young women, but mostly young men, would actually front up at the emergency department, unfortunately intoxicated or almost to the point where they can't stand up, they can't talk, they've been incontinent, and this is what we were confronted with and what healthcare professionals are confronted with, particularly if they work in an emergency department. And the indoctrination. Did I tell you I've been a nurse for 25 years? The indoctrination that actually comes with that is quite substantial, and you do actually end up feeling like anyone that tells you they're taking an illicit substance is being really naughty, and they deserve the punishment that they get. They probably deserve the overdose that they're going through, or they deserve the withdrawals that accompanies that. That sounds incredibly harsh, doesn't it? Isn't it totally me? But I know that there are a lot of other health professionals out there that have gone that far, and they might regret it in the end, because we're very lucky, aren't we, Jason, to have the abilities that we do have to provide much better pain relieving and addiction relieving herb and cannabis. Yeah. I mean, all of these people that I've worked with over the years have seen that frontline horror. And it is horror, guys. I don't know if anyone's ever been in a position where they have overdosed and they've needed to go to hospital. I may have had a little issue with that myself, but at the time didn't realise what I was doing. So No, I feel a lot better now. Thank you very much for asking.
It was the Canon Nana formerly.
I'm sorry, yeah, no, when you're driving with, amazing people all the way from Queensland, you do get a little bit tired and perhaps not provide as much important information as possible. So, in any case, I after finding out that cannabis didn't harm, and I can see that in my niece, she improved out of sight, and BJ helped with that. So it's Barry John Putter from the Church of Ubuntu in Newcastle. I've appreciated everything he's done for my sister and for Isabella and for myself. He actually came to me last year, which is something I really don't want to talk about. And I guess. Yeah, well, hey, I had 5 family members die in a really short succession of time. And, one of them was my uncle. I helped him off to heaven or to the afterlife at home with his 2 daughters there. They actually asked me if I could come and help out. And that was a very peaceful passing for him. My father was, relapsed with cancer, which is something that I helped him fight for around 3 years. Taking him to chemo and his radiation. I was an oncology nurse most of that 25 years I was talking about before. So taking him through that, it is horrific. I don't know if anyone here has ever been through it themselves or knows somebody that has had a throat or head and neck cancer. You have? Yeah, it's actually very confronting because a lot of the time they can actually have to, they get occluded. They can't breathe and they'll need a trachea put in. That happened to my father. So he wasn't able to talk through the duration of his, or through most of his treatment phase, and that was very distressing. Seeing him pinned down, I used to go and help patients all the time, and it never bothered me as a nurse. But when it's your dad, I guess it's a bit of a different story. But having him lie down and be pinned down with a mask for up to 20 minutes, without being able to move, having these rays shone down into your body. And I stood up in the monitoring room for that and actually watched him while the scanners rolled over him. It was full on, really full on to do that. And actually, he would actually get to the point where he was starting to gasp, and he was choking on his own secretions while he was lying there. So it was this battle to keep him alive, and at the same time, a battle to try and help him live. So, unfortunately, he was re-diagnosed, I think 6, maybe 8 months after his last treatment, and he passed quite quickly. But I found that incredibly distressing because Mr. Turnbull didn't legalise cannabis at the time, and my father would have used cannabis had it been legal, and he could have got it from his doctor. Yeah. So I was really cranky about that. I was that cranky. I was suggesting to the Parliament that perhaps they shouldn't think about having that Christmas break, and that they should just work through, make sure they get it legislated and passed. I think they thought I might have been a little bit nuts. I'm not sure, but very possible. Moving forward over a couple of months, I did have, my father passed, and there was another older family member who she passed on. She was in her 90s, and that was okay. But that was my son's friend.
I think what is really important to note here, Belinda, is that prohibition, this is an example of prohibition hurting good people. We're watching our family and friends suffer, and I'm done with it. We're sick of watching our friends and family needlessly suffer. I've got a friend, my best friend from high school is dying right now of pancreatic cancer. Now, she's been addicted to pharmaceutical drugs for 25 years and eating shit food, and they think Coca-Cola is food. They've assumed that the food in supermarkets is safe for human consumption and the personal care products are harmless. There's all these legal poisons everywhere, and we're not allowed to eat a plant. And that's what needs to be addressed, and it needs to be sorted now.
I agree.
It is prohibition, it's crime against humanity.
Yeah, thank you.
Here.
We have to take action.
And
part of
food,
the problem or part of the solution, the police need to be on board. They need for post-traumatic stress, all emergency workers. The nurses, how long are they going to sit around and watch people being
Not
dying?
this nurse, not anymore,
No, they're
Karen.
sitting around
Yeah,
and they're
no.
watching people dying
Yep.
from the treatment after being diagnosed with a condition, and enough is enough. It is
enough. Yes, it's enough.
We're saying no.
Enough is enough. Hey, Karen, yeah. Enough is enough. We've had it. Like, when you're talking about food too, my dad actually ended up having to have a tube put in. And he was fed just, that liquid milk that you get off the shelf that's been sitting there for over a year in the hospital, which is a medical grade food. I don't have a problem with that, except because, when you look at my dad, he wasn't able to swallow anymore, so he had to have food some way, and his wife wasn't able to, because of her disabilities, actually go and do perhaps organic bananas and organic avocados from coconut water. She was able to do that. Yeah, sorry. Oh, hey. Yeah, so, when we're talking about food choices, would you like to ask me something, Jason?
Yeah, no, I was just saying that the camera's here. It's lovely that we're talking to the people here. That's really good, but the cameras, they're watching this happening. So
I'm so sorry about that. I had no idea. Who's watching?
you might step back.
Are there people watching?
Okay. So actually, Belinda, there is a couple of questions that actually we want to bring because of your experience in the medical industry, obviously. Okay. Now, from your own family experiences watching your father being treated, to the 25 years in medicine, and you have seen an astounding manner of treatments for cancer, invasive in all sorts of ways. From carving up surgeries to using sorts of chemicals and radiation. Yeah?
Okay. Yeah, I have,
So that's pretty standard. Really horrendous, very, very dangerous.
Oh, Jason, I've gone as far as actually, re-injecting a new immune system into people with stem cell transplants. Yeah.
Right. So they'll go to all these extraordinary lengths to try and treat a cancer with all these extraordinary chemicals and invasive procedures, and yet, with in vitro trials and case studies going back over decades showing cancer has been retarded with the use of cannabis, has been destroyed with the use of cannabis. Can you give us an understanding why you believe that there hasn't actually been any further research? I mean, like, when you see such positive results with something...
Jason, there's research going on all the time, didn't you know?
No, yeah, but why isn't it... Why? Like, we're talking about decades and decades of successful research in cannabis showing really great results, and yet we're still sending, more people die from chemo than die from cancer, right? So the treatment that we're offering people for cancer, well, there's the money option, but you've got to think on a much grander scale, because every doctor's got kids. Every doctor's got parents. Not every doctor's got kids, but every doctor's got parents, probably brothers and sisters.
And can I tell you what it was?
So if they were sick themselves, don't you think that doctors would want his own family to have an ethical treatment? So you can't just say it's about the money and it's the pharma companies, because these same people would have families that those drugs could be saving.
And there's also some of them that believe that pharmaceuticals are safer than anything else too.
Well, there is, but the same thing is they're the same people that will go over to Sweden and Switzerland for those extreme treatments and the little boutique clinics and spend $500,000 getting peak testosterone stuck into their gonads and whatever else to try and beat these things, when we've got a harmless little plant that you can throw a seed in your backyard, and it's actually shown promise in treatment safely.
Well, amen to that, Jason. I want to add to that as well, if you don't mind that, just for a little bit. I do believe that, cannabis has a major part to play in the treatment of cancer. Yeah, it definitely does, and I believe there is some studies or trials.
There was actually in the 90s and the 80s there was a couple
here in
of
Australia right now.
Yeah, no, these were done in Spain, I believe, from memory.
Oh, okay. I might have a bit of inside information. I'll talk to you about it later.
Right. Lovely. All right. So, was there any questions that you had? Anybody's on the panel? Oh, hang on.
Does that work?
Ladies and gentlemen, his voice has entered the building.
Can I just say on that point of there haven't been enough studies yet, that's a perfect example of the psychology of prohibition, right? There's doubt and fear out there, which has been created by the propaganda and all the bullshit stigma and fear and demonisation that's gone on about all drugs, not just cannabis, right? Now, if you've got doubt and fear, what's a reason that means nothing but is, perfectly easy to express? Oh, there hasn't been enough research yet. It's the same as mental illness, okay? Everyone's scared of mental illness because if you lose your mind, like, shit, how scary is that? Like, no one understands it. Like, maybe a few people do, if they've got experience or they've worked in the field or whatever. But everyone's afraid of it, right? And to the point where people think that psychosis is a reason to jail people while they're smoking the cigarette that kills them, right?
Yeah.
That's the psychology of prohibition, and it's a con job.
Yeah.
And everyone's falling for it.
We are.
Oh, no, we are. No, seriously, we are.
We're
okay,
affected by it.
I've got to say that around the world, globally, and it's happening everywhere in the world, we are taking, one of the longest routes we can take. We're pushing cannabis on a population that doesn't want it, and they're saying, okay, sweet, you can have this tiny little thing, but we're going to toughen everything else up. And we're actually taking, it's a step in the right direction on the longest road there. Why don't we just take the shortcut? Is where I'm coming from. Let's just bypass, because every time we argue for cannabis, someone's going to go, oh, but this study says there's something bad, and we've got to be worried about that, and all of this prejudice comes, and basically it's just fear. Now, if we go through every individual fear, then we're going to need a million new laws and rules and regulations to make sure that every bit of fear is addressed. Whereas if we turn around and say, hey, there's actually nothing to be afraid of, let's just get over that shit and get on with it.
We agree.
All right, I'll get you to hold on to the mic just for 1 second, because I've actually got a question here from someone out in the audience and they didn't put their name on it, so I'm just going to read it. It says, can each member of the panel give their estimate when it will be legal?
Apparently it is.
It's a good question. How long do you think it takes?
To be honest, the whole process is going a whole lot quicker than I expected it to. I thought,
people power.
It was a mountain. I don't think it is people power, to be honest, and I don't think the movement in Australia has been particularly effective. I think it's all been led by the media. I think the enormous support we're getting for medical cannabis now has been media-led. It's not. The activists have been there a long time, and then all of a sudden it switched, and the media went, hey, you know what? We're going to pay attention to that now. Whereas up till that point, the media ignored everything, and it's not that people weren't doing stuff 10 years ago, but the media weren't focused on it. But
you don't see the point now. The media are getting involved, but they're not telling the truth. Like the media,
of course, it's all manipulation.
Deception.
But I think where the people power point comes from maybe is from the 20 and 30 year battle that's been going on in the States and in Canada, and so the Australian government's responding to the global change that's happening, but it's not. It's spin. It's been directed in such a way that's allowing more and more legislation to make everything tighter and more control. I mean, if I get out there and publicly teach people how to grow weed, I can now go to jail. That wasn't the case 2 years ago. We're not making progress. That's going backwards.
We've got new laws now. At the same time, Daniel Andrews was sitting on the front page of a newspaper with a small child with epilepsy on his lap going, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure this child can access medicine. Do you know what was happening on that same week? the ICE bill was being passed through Parliament, which made a specific offence for that child to receive cannabis medicine on school property, right? Because the ICE bill didn't actually contain any regulations about ICE. It contained a number of new regulations regarding cannabis, because the only substance mentioned in that thing were cultivated and cultivation. There's no mention of ICE in the entire ICE bill. 17 times they mentioned ICE in the preamble to get everyone to support it, and it was actually passed with no legislation, with no debate in the middle of the night.
Scheduled drug act.
And that's all.
Right?
That's
so
all
they
the media's
created
thing.
new offences specifically aimed at parents giving treatment to their children on or near a school, and made it an offence for a parent to not inform authorities if they believed a child was being given cannabis oil by a parent. Right? Now this is at the same time that Premier was sitting there on the front page of a paper with that dying child going, I'm doing everything I can to help this child. What he was really saying was, I'm doing everything I can to make sure this child dies, but I'll still vote for it while I'm on it. Okay? Is that okay with you guys? Will I take your vote this election? It was like, I remember back in the early 90s, I was sitting in the Gold Coast, that lovely little place on the beach, and I was so excited because Peter Biddy had told me, he promised me, he said, if you get me elected, you can have a kilo of personal. No dramas at all. So you know what we did? We got him elected, and you know what he said the day after? He's gone, you're not going to believe this. Somebody just told me how much a kilo is. We're going to have to reassess the size, but we'll get back to you straight away. Now that was once again in the early 90s. You still can't have any weed in Queensland. These are the promises that were made to us a quarter of a century ago. What I'm asking people is to realise that no matter what is said, no matter what promises are made to you, they are not going to keep them. The only way we are going to get this to happen is by working towards raising the awareness of the truth. That cannabis is not killing people, but every single day that cannabis isn't available, people are dying. Every single day, someone is dying from prescription drug overdose. But they say you can't have cannabis because it might be unsafe. Now, cannabis has never killed anyone. Not one. Not one every single day. They haven't taken those drugs off the market. They haven't taken alcohol off the market. I mean, we wouldn't let them. Even I like to drink. I'm human, mostly. Shush. So, I had to interrupt there because he was going on. Time schedule. When do you think it will be legal?
Well, if we're really stupid, we could probably drag it out for another 20 years.
Yeah, the Greens here in Victoria, they kind of spoke against it in some ways. It was really weird, but then voted in support of it.
Just away from the politics side, because
it's a political issue. You asked me a question of when it's going to be legalised. That's something that
your personal opinion of when you think it will be legalised. As I said,
no, this is actually really important.
25 years ago, we were promised that politically.
I understand that. I am coming to the point.
Nothing that's happening in Parliament now is going to eventuate in it happening.
No, I'm sorry. You asked me a question. I need to figure out the answer. I did warn you guys I'd have to take a moment with it.
I'm just trying to get your opinion.
Yeah, and I'm going to get to that. Sorry, I've lost where I was at.
Well, let's start the process.
So they had the debate in Parliament, and even on the Liberal side, they'd actually kind of done something a little bit different and engaged with the issue. They went and spoke to people in the AOD sector, and they spoke about that. They made the common mistake that's made in the argument around prohibition, and it's the most fundamental, logical fallacy, where they say, oh, there's a harm, therefore prohibition, but there's no evidence that prohibition actually reduces that harm. So that's kind of the essence of what happened with the debate. But the committee also had a lawyer from the Drug Policy Alliance in the United States named Daniel Abrahamson come out, and he helped draft some of the legislation and the background work that went into the legalization in Colorado, and in particular in California. And so what they did in California was they really worked on a well-rounded regulated supply. They thought about a lot of things like expunging previous records of people that had a drug conviction to make sure that there wasn't an ongoing discrimination in the legal industry so that people could get employed. Because there's that racial disparity in the drug war. So, we've kind of heard this debate. Right now, the politics in Victoria, they're kind of bullshit.
You saw the ones in Queensland.
Pardon?
The ones in Queensland are too.
I imagine it's even worse there, because you don't have the advantage of an upper house, so you can get minor party candidates.
There's 5 countries in the world where
No. I want to talk about
So,
have an entire parliament of representationals, and we just,
Independence?
Yeah, that's pretty much it, based on
or there is this amazing opportunity coming up that you guys would like to be a part of. I did talk to Greg about that a little bit earlier, and he put his hand up for that one.
All right, I just want to keep moving on.
Please.
So, would you like me just to quickly come to the point of what I was saying?
Okay, if we can stop talking about America and operate overseas models and ask for your personal opinion when you think we're going to see legalisation. Because that's what they want to know. It's like trying to get the
If you stop talking, I'll get to the answer. So there is like support swinging with the minor parties. The Greens in a couple of states have like come behind like a legal regulated supply for adult use. There's an LDP candidate in Perth right now who's also come behind it, and Richard Di Natale's kind of swung the federal greens. So that's a little bit about what's happening. In terms of getting it across the line, now that comes down to grassroots activism, because the politicians aren't going to move on it unless we make them. No, and this is what happened with the injecting centre down here in Melbourne, that argument. There's broad support within both of the major parties, like, a majority support for that issue, but it's not getting across the line without the political mobilisation. Now, it's going to, because the most effective grassroots campaign I've ever seen is the residents of North Richmond arguing for a supervised injecting centre. They are going to get that within 12 months. I've never seen such an effective grassroots mobilisation in my life. They are so good at what they're doing. Now, what we need to get it across the line is for the cannabis movement to get that coordinated, to get that organised, to get that networked with other people, to get allies across the spectrum. Now, if that happens, the possibility in Victoria is maybe 6 years. But I think if we kind of stumble along and we don't get well organised and we don't really campaign hard, it could take 10 years. And as Matt says, if we really fuck it up, it could take 20. So that's my answer.
Cool. I'm just going to continue on with the same question, because I do actually want to get Greg's input from, because Greg has been around the scene for a very long time. He's also very aware of the international sort of like movement as far as the DPA and so forth. So,
thanks, Jason, and it's lovely to sit here next to my young optimist here, who said 10 years.
The student organisation. We are the optimists.
As Jay says, I have been around for a while. I've been smoking cannabis for 40 years of my life. And proud to say that and stand with you people that also stand up for their right to consume a herb, a plant. And just to comment on what Karen said, this is one of the great social justice issues of our time, if not the great social justice issue of our time. The numbers are just bloody unbelievable. There's 80,000 people, 80,000 Australians arrested, dragged through the courts, demeaned, 80,000 Australians arrested for cannabis. Now, if that wasn't bad enough, 90% of those Australians, those predominantly young Australians, are arrested for consumption, for the sheer act of either possessing or consuming a herb. Now, this is one of the great social issues of our time. Now, in relation to the question that was asked, let me be succinct. I believe it will be 25 years, 25 painful, bloody years before Australia legalises cannabis. Now, I have seen this debate ebb and flow over the last 40 years, and we are now at one extreme end of the pendulum. And I'm sorry to say this to anyone that's a little bit more optimistic, but look at the medical legislation that we got. It is bullshit. We have not got medical cannabis in this country. We have been conned by self-interested politicians who grandstand and take photo opportunities claiming that they have compassion for sick people using cannabis. But that's not the case. We know that people are dying of cancer unable to access cannabis, unable to have their diets regulated by a health-giving food. So when I say 25 years, the reason I say that this country is in the actual grip of reefer madness. And Matt was saying that people have ingrained prejudice against cannabis and cannabis use. He was saying that the legislation in Victoria, and Ash was saying as well, that the legislation nationally has got more severe, not less severe, over the last 2 or 3 years. And every state has enacted variations of these legislation, redefining what medical cannabis is, increasing penalties for possession of cannabis, for information about growing cannabis. So that is in absolute contradiction, diametrically opposite to what's happening in the international situation, which Jay is saying. Now, there are some very interesting developments internationally, which is why I say 25 years and not 50 years. Cannabis is now fully legal in 20 states and in 20% of the American population. Canada has just had a bill introduced to Parliament to legalise and regulate cannabis. And Uruguay, another country, has already done that. Now, the question that we're going to be facing in the next 5 or 10 years is, what sort of legalisation are we going to have in this country? Are we going to have the legalisation of medical cannabis, and I don't know if you remember this, the Clayton's legalisation, the pretend legalisation, the legalisation that the Conservatives get on in and sabotage? And do we as a movement not stand up and defend the model of legalisation that we want? And that model of legalisation is being able to grow our own herb in our own back garden. That's important. We've got to put it on the table now. That's what we want, and we've got to demand that. We want to be able to grow a simple plant in our background. Now, the other important thing is here, we have got to take no prisoners in this debate. We have got to convince people that marijuana is not a cause of schizophrenia. It is not a deadly drug. We have got to make the case strong and get the people that have banned these drugs, that have persecuted you and me for 40 or 50 years, we've got to get them to say they were bloody wrong. We've got to get the United Nations treaties rewritten, and somebody's got to say we were bloody wrong. Cannabis is a medical herb. It does have therapeutical value, and it is not a crime to possess and consume cannabis. So that is the legalisation that we want to have. It's going to be 25 years. What we will get in 5 years in this country is the same thing that happened in the medical cannabis debate. And the reason we'll get that is not from internal activism, because Australia is caught up in the iron grip of prohibition ever since Howard. What we've got to do is stand up and argue the sort of laws we want. And that's, we'll make it maybe 5 or 10 years, we'll get some quasi-semi-legalisation. If we stand up, we might get it sooner. But if we don't stand up, it'll be 25 years or never. Well, I think that the standing up time is now.
As you can see, across centuries, we're talking decades, we're talking years, we're talking 20 years, 30 years. Like, 20 days is too long for people to continue suffering. When they say there's medical value, we know there's medical value. I've got a 1927 copy of Pharmacopoeia. There are over 400 different preparations containing cannabis. If you were a doctor in 1927 and somebody came to you and said, "I've got epilepsy," you go, "Here's some cannabis." You went to a doctor in 1927 and say, "Oh, menstrual cramps," I go, "Here's some cannabis." You went to a doctor in 1927 and say, "Oh, my leg fell off," you went, "Here, have some cannabis." Well, you would have done you good, but you feel a bit better about your leg being gone. The thing was, it made up the backbone of Western medicine.
Can I
centuries
interrupt and make a point about the psychology of prohibition? Again? All right. As people in this country, we understand that powerful medicines, you need to go to an expert, you need to go to a state authorised person to get those powerful medicines because they're dangerous. But as cannabis activists out there telling everyone that cannabis is a powerful medicine, we should be able to grow it in our own backyards, and we wonder why they're not hearing us. Powerful medicines are dangerous. People shouldn't have access to powerful medicines. Right, this is the psychology of prohibition, right? We're going about it the wrong way. We're telling people to tighten regulation up and then wondering why they don't do it.
I've got to agree with you there, Matt, because I felt the same way when you're going up against the medical fraternity, when it was just the push for medical, you get that whole grunting up against the whole fraternity of people whose entire livelihood depends upon them controlling everything medical. So they were never, ever going to freely go, oh, you're right, you know.
What's the difference between medical cannabis and cannabis is medicine?
Oh,
A level of fucking bullshit.
It is bullshit. And
medical
THC
cannabis may not necessarily be cannabis, so there's a difference there. It could be something like synthetic.
The artificial THC versus CBD.
Cannabis is cannabis. It's a plant. And it's good for you. It can't kill you. And no matter what shape or form you put it into, it's cannabis. When you start mixing chemicals together in a lab and saying, there you are, have some cannabis.
What's marijuana?
That's a word for cannabis.
Slang.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Who made that up?
Mexicans.
Well, they say Mexicans. I don't know.
No.
They seem to blame the Americans for the whole...
They changed the name so that they could tax it and get away with it. If they had kept it as cannabis, people would have gone, oh no, I'm not going to, go for that bullshit story. But they changed the name and made it marijuana and this evil substance. So, and it fooled the people, and we're going to tax it now.
Should you believe all the YouTube clips?
People into believing that, they were standing up for something that was right.
That comes back to the prejudice. By giving it a Mexican name in a society that was very prejudiced against Mexicans, it became really easy for everyone to think that it was bad, and it doesn't have anything to actually do with cannabis. Like, cannabis is irrelevant. It's just playing on irrational fears.
It was racism.
Could I just come to a point on this? Somebody mentioned before there was something like 4 decades of prohibition in Australia. That's not actually the case. It's more like about 115. The first law on the books for prohibition of a drug in Victoria was against smokable forms of opium. And you can find it in an immigration note. You kind of look around the historical records, and that's because it was a law that was specifically targeted towards Chinese immigrants. That's the nature of prohibition. Now, when I say I'm maybe more optimistic than these guys about the possibility for reform, you guys need to think beyond cannabis. That supervised injecting centre is going to happen in Melbourne. I've never seen, seriously, I've been involved in the environmental movement for over 15 years. I've never seen such an organised and well-coordinated campaign, and it's coming from the residents. That's going to make a difference, because any chip, any little crack that we can pry into the bullshit of prohibition helps the whole movement.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's something that you kind of need to consider as well.
I think that movement that.
You're going to give it to him. He's going to talk, isn't he?
Yeah, that's it. I think, as Ash is saying, there's a very, very effective group of people in Richmond, and it's this residents' organisation. And I think there's another point that I want to make there. Part of prohibition, part of the stigma, part of that oppression that happens to drug users, it disempowers the actual users themselves, right? Now this residents' organisation has been so powerful and effective because the people who make it up, they're not the actual drug users themselves. They are the people who live in the area, and they're seeing the devastation. They're seeing heroin users overdosing in the streets, and they are stepping up as caring human beings wanting to look after their fellow human beings. Now, the cannabis movement around the world and drug law reform movements that are based on drug-using people trying to move forward, that's really hard to get that effective momentum and power happening, because we're talking with an oppressed bunch of people. Right? These residents aren't. They're the mothers, they're the fathers, they're the nurturers of the community, and they are standing up to address a wrong, and that's why they're having such an impact and all power to them. And it is, you know, whether it's heroin or ice or any of the illicit drugs, it comes down to prejudice and the same psychological tricks that are going on. And every time we say cannabis is wonderful, go and chase the ice heads, we are the problem. We are keeping prohibition going, and which is why I want to take it away from pro-cannabis and make it anti-prohibition, because that's where the psychology's got to be. Otherwise, we're creating division and weakening ourselves every step of the way.
Right, so there was actually one here I really liked. What can we, as individuals, do to help the laws get changed? You're doing it by turning up. And if we have another event somewhere else, turn up. And just keep turning up.
What else?
Get involved with some of the support agencies out there. We have a few projects coming up this year for a saturation project with talk show, radio shows and stuff like that. Basically, get involved with the groups. Talk to your admins. Don't go, oh, I'm going to do this and head off in a direction and start doing something, because you end up with 10 different people heading off in 10 different directions doing 10 different things. We are dispersing the power. Potentially, we have got one of the most formidable communities in this country. There are over 2.25 million people in Australia that regularly use cannabis. If we had 10% of that, it's 25,000 people. That's 250,000 people. It's 250,000.
But I think also, politicians.
250,000 people, 10% of people. If we can get 10% of the people that regularly use weed to turn up at events, we'd have 250,000 people on the street. Now that sends a powerful message. Sitting at home. So? They can't arrest us all. And that's it. You don't have to. You don't have to support cannabis. Keep that in mind. To support the end of suffering. To support the end of prohibition doesn't mean you're supportive of drugs of any kind. You don't have to be, oh, I think drugs are great, or, oh, I think you should be allowed to get stoned if he wants. It's immaterial. What you should be thinking is, I think it's really unfair that that person that's really sick over there can't access their medicine. What you should be thinking is that person over there who is just getting someone kicking in their door and ripping their home apart because they've been giving medicine to 3 or 4 sick children across the country. I don't think that should be happening. That's why you need to be standing up and saying, it's enough. It's not so people can get stoned. Look, I am 50 years old. I've smoked cannabis for 36 years. Now, when I want cannabis, I go and buy cannabis. There's no difficulty in me acquiring cannabis. There's never been a difficulty in me acquiring cannabis. Because even though cannabis is illegal, there is an industry in this country that sells me cannabis that turns over $11 billion in hard cash currency every year. Now that's not bank transfers, credit cards, or even credit. Well, a bit of credit there, obviously. It gets paid, I'm sure.
Non-transferable.
Non-transferable credits, that's right. But the thing is, we've got $11 billion in hard cash currency changing hands every single year. That's more than the combined income of every McDonald's restaurant in Australia. Okay? Over $11 billion in hard cash currencies. That is ending up buried, stuck in tubes. I won't say where else. You might go looking. The market is there. And when I'm sitting here saying to you that prohibition has to end, it's obviously not so I can go and buy some cannabis. Because I can already go and buy my cannabis. He can buy his cannabis. He can buy his cannabis and he can buy... Well, right? We smoke cannabis. And we will continue to smoke cannabis whether the laws change or not. But the thing comes down to you, the public, isn't that while you allow that law to stand, while you allow prohibition to be there, which is not stopping us from smoking cannabis, it is causing suffering to women, children and men around the world. People are dying and suffering because you won't let them access this weed, this harmless plant. Having that law there does not stop that plant permeating through society. What it does is it creates... When you're talking $11 billion, right, that's a lot of money. That kind of money attracts very, very nasty people. Very, very nasty people. People die, people disappear, not because they take cannabis, but because they get involved in an industry that prohibition has caused and perpetuates. I have a friend who is in jail right now for crushing a guy's skull with a concrete brick because he ripped him off for $3,000. Okay? It took 2 weeks to find the little piece of shit, and it took 2 hours to beat him into such a state that everyone thought he was dead. So they took him out into a state forest and they left him there overnight, wrapped in a rug, because the ground was too hard and they were pussies and they couldn't even dig a shallow grave. So they left him there overnight, wrapped in that rug, and they all went home. And one guy went home and he said to his girlfriend, "Oh, I've really fucked up." And she's like, "What's wrong?" He said, "I can't tell you, they'll kill me." The other guy went home and he sat there and he's just all night. The other guy went home. He sat there all night and he goes, "I'm going to just kill someone." And these two guys know I've done it and they know where the body is. So the next morning he got up and he rang them. And he got them both and he took them both out to that same forest. And they got that body and they stuck it back in the boot of the car and they took it down to the Jimbo and they buried it in the sand dunes. Because he made sure that those boys were well and truly connected. He didn't want them turning around. Unfortunately, the one that had went home the night before to his girlfriend and said, "You won't believe what I've done," went back that afternoon and went, "Oh, fuck, we're going to kill him." Because he knew it was going to come, and it would have. It would. Sooner or later, Stretch would have just gone, "Nah, we're going to talk," and he would have taken them out. But before that could happen, that girlfriend, she went down to the cops and she said, "Listen, my boyfriend's young and he's done something stupid. Please help him." So they all went to jail. The body was dug up from the... Yeah, check it out. The boys are still in jail now. It was dug up in the dunes of Majimba. And you know what they found with the autopsy? They found that he hadn't died during that terrible, terrible assault. And seriously, I will never ever forget. You imagine the sound of a brick going into a slab of meat. With a little... Someone's life ebbing away. And he didn't die. He died of exposure during that night, alone in a state forest. Because of $3,000. $3,000. That's all his life was worth. Now, cannabis didn't kill him. He died of prohibition, that's right. Cannabis didn't kill him. The man with the brick, yeah, fair enough. He pretty much did a lot of the killing. But it was the situation. Now, when I tell you that man with that brick, you're probably all thinking he was probably some big, nasty-ass bikie that, you know, just went around killing people and beating people. He wasn't. He was a loving father with a couple of beautiful little girls that he would have died for. He was a loving partner. He went to work and paid his bills and he raised his family. But because he flipped a pound over, one at a time, buy a pound, break it into ounces, just to supplement his smoking, as a lot of people do, a little bit of extra cash, as a lot of people do. Not a big dealer, no gold chains, no fast Maserati, just a guy flipping a pound. So when that $3,000 went over that fence in that little bugger's hand, that was the end of his business. That was the end of him being able to smoke. It was the end of him being able to pay the extras for the kids, the end of them being able to go off to the school camps, the end of the music lessons, because that was the little side income. That was all gone in that moment. So when he was bashing that guy to death in that yard with that brick, was it a big bad bikie going, "Oh, you stole from me, oh, you're a terrible person"? No. That was a man that had all of a sudden been put into a very difficult place. And the emotions rose up and he lost control, as people do with human beings. The kid that died was a twin. Okay? Now, that one instance, we've got a dead guy. Okay? We've got a twin brother that's going to feel that loss every time he looks in the mirror. We've got parents that are going to look at the remaining son and know that the other is gone. We've got a little sister there that loved her brother. And then we come to the guy that killed him. We've got his partner that no longer has someone there overnight. We've got kids that no longer have a father to look after them and raise them. You know? All of these harms that ripple out from that one little event. And that one little event is happening all over the place. You've only got to go and look at the missing persons list, right? Because that's what it comes down to, missing persons. They don't leave bodies around to be found usually. They're all out in the forest somewhere. That's prohibition. That is the real effect of prohibition. That is what is happening today, yesterday, and if we don't do something about it, that is exactly what is going to continue happening tomorrow.
Prohibition hurts good people.
So the question was, what can people do?
Yeah.
So the people that have come out and spoke to us that we've networked with in our organisation consistently, and this includes Dr. Alex Wodak, who's going to be speaking at our first national conference in mid-August, campaigning, letter writing, how to speak on talkback radio, how to organise, how to create brochures, how to do all those kinds of things.